the most common talent challenges that founders face when they are scaling.
Not being ahead of complexity for hiring, especially today, with how fast things are moving in our AI-enabled world, that is going to make the incremental difference. You've lost time by not thinking ahead of it.
Hi, my name is Glaze.
Hi, my name is Jazzy, and welcome to Let's Table That. If you're curious how world-class organizations are actually built, Krista is your person. We are really excited to welcome Krista today, Chief Talent Officer at Inovia Capital. She works with founders and portfolio companies to help design high-performance talent strategies that scale.
Today, we're unpacking how to navigate massive company growth and leadership complexities and turning HR into a strategic powerhouse.
You're not looking for a friend, but I think the respect piece is important.
Let's welcome Krista to the group chat.
Krista, welcome to the group chat. We are very excited to have you here today. I know you are a busy lady, actively involved in many things, from advising on a board to Chief Talent Officer. I think to just get our listeners prepped for what info they're going to hear, maybe they'd like to hear about your background, if you want to share something there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Of course.
Very exciting to be here. As you mentioned, I am an operating partner and Chief Talent Officer at Inovia Capital, and I wear two hats within the firm. So I head up our people and culture function internally. So we're a 60-person company headquartered in Montreal with offices in Toronto, Calgary, London, and Waterloo, London, UK, and Waterloo, Ontario. And then I have the privilege of working with our portfolio companies, and it could range from the founders in earlier stage to leadership teams to our people and culture teams in those companies on all kinds of HR and talent. It could go from talent strategy, hiring, organizational design, team dynamics. Prior to that, I was living in the Middle East. I was in Abu Dhabi for 9 years, working for a sovereign wealth fund, internal HR role, heading up HR for private equity, venture capital, real estate, infrastructure, and hedge funds. And at the end, it was a big change mandate within that sovereign wealth fund. But towards the end of it, I started getting pulled into, hey, we've got this founder. The VC team would say, we've got this founder. He's got some questions. We're doing some human capital due diligence on this private equity deal. And I thought to myself, that sounds interesting. It took me back to my consulting days where I'd spent quite a bit of time in consulting in different areas of HR, leadership development, change management. And I thought this is kind of a nice segue to, didn't want to go back to consulting, had done kind of, in a big sovereign wealth fund, the internal role. And this just seemed like a natural progression to that.
That's amazing. I didn't know you lived in Abu Dhabi for so long.
I did for 9 years. It was supposed to be 3.
Wow. What extended it?
The weather.
I was just going to ask.
I do not blame you with that, with today's weather.
The role was fascinating. The sovereign wealth fund I was with, the change element of it took a little bit longer than we had originally anticipated. And we were just enjoying life there. It's a great place to be. Just the opportunities for travel, language, culture,
yes,
food, everything about it.
And prior to Abu Dhabi, were you in Toronto?
No, prior to Abu Dhabi, I was in Paris.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yes, I was working for Oliver Wyman is where I ended. I did a brief stint at Sodexo heading up their Leadership Institute, but had arrived in Paris with my 6-month-old son. My husband had already moved there. He's from France originally, so that helped with some of the move.
Yes.
But we set up home. I continued doing some independent consulting work and then moved over to Oliver Wyman. And next thing we knew, I got tapped on the shoulder for this role in Abu Dhabi and thought it was just the right moment in both our lives as well as professionally for me.
That's amazing.
I applaud you going to Paris with a 6-month-old and having a supportive husband. I feel like that's a great partnership.
Oh, absolutely.
That's great.
Yes, I'm very fortunate.
Relocation is not an easy feat.
No.
Yeah, that's awesome. With your role at Inovia Capital. How did you transition then from Abu Dhabi to that? How did you know that that was the right next step for you? What was some of the motivational factors there?
So I knew I loved consulting. I'd spent most of my career in boutique firms, in bigger firms, ended up with, kind of one of the biggest consulting firms, always on the topics of HR, but the building blocks of it. I did some boutique firm competency development work. I remember early in my career doing competency development using this card sorting system with managers at RBC.
No way.
Right? And it was like,
okay,
how does this fit into that? There was always these elements of how do these pieces fit in together? I did time at a tech startup in a performance management software company. So a company that went public called Saba Software. So spent some time with them. Had the fortune at Saba to meet someone by the name of Dr. Paul Elliott. We had acquired his boutique consulting firm, and he looked much more at organizational systems, right? And that was one of the things that just kept in these building blocks of competency development, leadership development, right? Different kind of areas of HR. I thought there's something in the system, right? What we call, how do you orchestrate? How do you architect the right system to allow performance to happen? And it was really through Dr. Paul Elliott that I had, that was a big learning for me. It was a big moment of, okay, this is how it seems to come together. And then he invited me. He had left Saba. I had left Saba. He invited me to do a project. It was a project. It lasted 5 years, this project. But it was with Microsoft at the time. And I traveled around the world. My husband was traveling. We didn't have the baby at the time. And it was really looking at performance, not from a performance management, but really the job design. How do you design jobs and work? And they took their high-performing managers around the world to help with that project. I went to Colombia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brazil, Argentina, around the world for them.
Wow.
It was incredible. So there's always a little bit of my story that is the travel element. I obviously have a little bit of a travel bug because I actually started in Japan. My first foray into HR was in Tokyo.
You're just giving us all the best, like the list.
But sometimes things happen and you just seize the opportunities. I used to think a career in the Foreign Service would be a cool thing. That's why I studied political science. This whole idea, I did my master's thesis in independence movements, right? And at the time, I won't tell you, I tried to when I was preparing my notes and I thought, you're just lying. That there's something about how systems are designed, whether they be political systems or company systems. That realization didn't come to me until much later. But when I was in Tokyo, I had the opportunity, I was teaching English, did that gap year thing of not sure what I wanted to do, go to teach English. And one of the managers of the school I was in said, listen, we're launching a new program. It has more of a cultural than a language element to it. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds intriguing, right? So to me, that was really the first taste of this is what HR could look like, right? How do you prepare people to go into another culture, business culture? They were being sent for work to go live for a couple of months and on assignment. How do you prepare them for those types of opportunities? And it really got me thinking about how do you do that, right? Sure, there's things that there's language things, there's customs, there's things that people do that you can prepare for, but really and truly, and oftentimes it feels like we put it on the individual to know that, and they should, right? But there's also the system that we design on the other end that should be accepting of those cultures, like in companies where how do we find that balance between what the individual brings and how do we, in HR, people, culture, talent, architect the system that allows that performance to thrive, right? And finding that balance.
Kind of
That's
like
awesome.
culture add and culture fit. Nice.
That's awesome.
It's a good perspective.
I don't think it's either or.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? There is a balance between the two.
That's correct. Now that you mentioned your academic work or, focusing on political movements or societal change, how did that background shape the way you view talent today?
It really is that architect or systems thinking about, right? How do you design the system? How do you think about the individual intention, right? No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go to work today and do a shitty job, right? People wake up with the intention of, I'm going to perform at my best today, right? So what is it in the system sometimes that's not allowing that to happen, that disconnect? And when I use the word system, to me, it means like how is leadership decision making? How does decision making happen? What are the communication protocols? How clear and intentional are we with what our performance expectations are, right? And I think sometimes in HR roles, we add a little bit too much of am I putting the right HR programs in place and not taking care of some of the fundamentals in the system that could be broken or need tweaked in order for that to happen, for the performance to, performance at scale within the right system. Years ago, I'd mentioned Dr. Paul Elliott. He introduced me to an older HR thinker, Gary Rumler, who to me, it holds true today. You put a good performer in a bad system and the system wins every time, right? The system is kind of and that's true of political systems like it is of the systems that we create in our workplaces.
I do believe very much in systems. That's very much how my brain works. Yes, I feel like you can be more productive too, and with a good system.
And then consistency's there.
Yeah, for sure. Any examples you can share around what instances where you've been in environments where it just was broken, or at what point would a system could be broken by if a specific element is not correct?
I think there's I don't know if I can speak to any specific examples without breaking confidentiality.
You can keep it general.
I think there are many examples, and us here and those listening to us have probably had similar experiences where what our values, what we put as a company, as our company values, don't necessarily show up in the decisions that we make, right?
Yes.
Or the decisions that we choose not to make, right? Because oftentimes those are really where your true values come out, not so much what you say, but what you choose not to do. So I think those are multiple examples. I think the in performance cultures where sometimes we focus on performance to the detriment of values, right? We've lived those situations where performance might be there, but to the detriment of, and not taking action necessarily quick enough in those circumstances. I think there is with all good intention, I don't think this is done in any way where people come in and again say, oh, I really want to screw this up, right? I don't want to be clear so that people understand. I think we assume a lot. And especially when you think of scaling companies, and to me, when I look at scale in our portfolio companies, to me, this is incremental scale, right? 0 to 20, and then 20 to 50. There's a scale point there, and you're not necessarily that you're going to do the same things, and the same thing with 50 to 100, and so on and so forth. But I think often in the early days, we assume that people know because it still feels small enough, intimate enough. And we're not necessarily explicit in our communications, performance expectations, decision making. So there's a lot of assumptions. Well, people know this. They should or they do, but we don't necessarily make it explicit. And I think that's what changes in a culture that really drives towards being as explicit as possible, intentional in how they communicate.
So if a company was, let's say, at 0 to 20 employees, what would that system look like? If a founder can't afford an HR person, what would that system look like for them in order to function?
To me, it's about the defining, whether you do it as a formal quarterly review, OKR review process, but still having those goals, that clarity of vision, making sure they're communicated, and not just once, that there's a cadence, right? And sometimes I know that you hear these words and you think, well, there's 10 of us in the company. What does that mean to have a cadence? But I think it's important that remembering that once a month, having a conversation about here's where we're at, here's where we're going, doing that check-in almost. It's important in a 10-person company. I'd argue it applies to any system we operate in, your relationship system, right? Your system with friends, where we've all lived those situations where under communicating, miscommunication, et cetera,
Yes,
leads to, right? And it always comes down to what we forgot or didn't or thought people understood, right? As opposed to being a little bit intentional. So I think the clarity of that communication, I think from a founder perspective, is understanding that every incremental hire is changing things more quickly. When you're a company that's 100 people and you hire 10, 110 versus 100 doesn't really change the dynamic. But in the early days, every hire
is a big change.
Right?
Yeah.
So the impact of those hires on whether it be a culture ad or cultural line, but know that it is changing. There is going to be some kind of change.
That's great. I love that. I think that with any sort of system, when you talk about clarity, I appreciate a good structure. And I think anyone going into an organization, especially performance, a good structure is good to have. If that cadence is once a month, every 2 weeks, at least you both have clarity on what is the expectation of this person.
It's motivational and reassuring.
And engaging. Correct. Yeah. Yes.
And on that note, I know you have consulted with many companies before, worked with different portfolios. Curious what you think are the most common talent challenges that founders face when they are scaling.
The most common ones are probably hiring, waiting, not being ahead of complexity for hiring. Sometimes I often hear, the people that got us to this point aren't necessarily the ones that can get us to the next point, but it's often made at a decision, an important decision point where you may be at that next point, right? Or on the cusp of that next point. And especially today, with how fast things are moving in our AI-enabled world, is that time to find that team or that person, even if it's just one person, that is going to make the incremental difference, or that is the one who's going to be able to take to the next level. You've lost time by not thinking ahead of it, right? So almost hiring ahead of complexity, it's a hard one to do because you don't want to hire too far ahead, right? And then you're overpaying for talent that needs that talent, needs something that is a bit more robust and complex. So there's a fine balance in there. I mentioned the idea of every hire is a cultural change, right? There is that hiring. So being kind of aware of that, I think there's the leadership transition in any kind of company growing is, how do I become the leader who's not doing, but I'm designing, right?
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Is that your own? Did you think
It
of that?
is.
Your own?
It is.
Okay,
We'll
great.
quote that.
That's going to be a quote for us. Okay, great. Okay.
Right? So there really is that, and it's hard to step away from. It's, and I think even harder, right? If you take over a business, right? Let's say today you decide I'm going to buy that small business and I'm going to be the CEO of that business. Little bit different when it wasn't the business that you started, right? It's your baby. You're growing this. So how to step back from it and be aware that it's a conscious decision that you're bringing in folks who have expertise that you didn't necessarily have to come into those roles. So
I'm just curious, after this background you shared with your travel, in sense of cultures and just, I guess, norms in the different areas you've been, would you say you've seen any striking differences between the different regions within how founders perceive when they should hire? Like, I know sometimes North America, that's very common, what you just explained, that sometimes you might wait a little bit too long and then you miss time.
I don't know if that one I'd attribute to a cultural element per se. I think leaders in general founders, leadership teams, any of us really in position, it's hard to let someone go, right? That's just and sometimes it's the best thing for the company and the person, right? There's often those examples. I'd say to me, it is more some of the cultural elements around hiring that are how difficult it can be to do will dictate a little bit the behavior. Knowing, so if you're in Europe, for example, knowing that sometimes bringing someone on board isn't as easy as it necessarily is in the US and even Canada, right? Where you know that there are consequences if you do need to let that person go, or right, there's a riff that needs to be planned for, or something that the business is dictating, right? There's no other choice. How hard that can be because of what exists in French or Spanish or German.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Exactly. That it's harder to do.
Yeah.
I think where you see it play out is in how I noticed it probably most in the Middle East. And this could be right, and the Japanese as well, a little bit of it's a big commitment, right? You're kind of joining in countries where I think they're used to having, in the UAE, especially, a lot of expats. I was joining a very Emirati organization, right? So there's a little bit of the interview process was very long. They're digging deep into cultural fit, culture add, right? But really trying to test for that. Is this person the right hire, looking almost for that silver bullet that we know doesn't necessarily exist. So there's probably a little more caution. Just a little more caution is how I would. After that, there's different, kind of approaches and interview styles and the questions that are asked and what you're allowed to ask.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, when you talked about founders, looking for people sort of like at that cusp of things breaking, what are some signals that founders can look out for so that they're not at that stage? They can prepare for it, especially if they don't have an HR person in those early stages of their organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. Oftentimes, I think it will come with, it comes from your customer base, right? So I'd say customers and product, right? A new product release, new features that will have an impact on customers in how they're supported after, or in new sales where the requirements will all of a sudden be different in what they're asking the company for, right? And you don't necessarily have those resources. Or in new markets where all of a sudden they're very regulated markets, right? And you don't necessarily have that skill set internally just to wing it or make it up anymore, right? Because it is a highly regulated environment. And I think we anticipate that from a potential for complexity, et cetera, but not necessarily being ahead of it around, okay, well, what do the profiles look like that I need if I'm going to enter that market, scale in this way, change my product, add features, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Love that. And you've also, going back to organizational design, I love that piece. What separates organizations that scale well from those that struggle?
The ones that scale well treat org design, the org, as an asset, right? And it's an asset like it is any other asset in your firm, in your company, that requires management, right? Fine tuning. You can't just it doesn't happen by chance. That it is very intentional in terms of what do I need to adjust in the org? How are my product and customer support teams or product and engineering, or being conscious of those ties between functions, and whether it be, teams of 3 in each of those functions, they're still functions, right? And how they come together. And then as they grow, obviously it gets more and more complicated. We touched on the one, but I'll say it again, where you go from doing to designing, right? To me, that is an important one. Giving freedom to the functional experts that you brought in, but it also means being explicit. To me, the organizations that do this well are explicit in, what do I need from you in that case? You're my 2 functional experts I've just brought in. What do I need from you on a regular basis, and at what cadence? I'm big on structure as well, but do I need, as the founder, do I need monthly dashboards? And here's the information I'd like to see. And when you're not explicit about that, you're going to deliver something one way, right? Your work style. You're going to maybe not do it, and it'll be more informal conversations. But if neither of those approaches work for me, it's not your fault. It's my fault for not telling you, right?
Yeah.
Not that we're placing fault, but you know what I mean? It's on me. So there is a very intentionality in what the expectations are, not so much in, what I'm going to communicate, but also what I expect in communication back to me on updates.
Right. When you're thinking about redesigning structures, how can you do that? Is it possible to redesign structures without disrupting performance? What would you say are the pros or cons with that?
I would say that today we actually don't have a choice, right? Because the technology is almost disrupting them for us. So and I think we're seeing this, we're all experiencing it individually, like we are in the companies we work with. We are a bit in that phase where we're talking about productivity gains, but we're also in a period where change is happening, and some of it will have the system be redesigned, the structure be redesigned because of the what's no longer needed or possible needed more than anything. So we're living it. To me, we're living that. Is it going to be messy? Yes. Right. We've also seen the articles where, are we as productive, or is there also risk of burnout as we try to become more productive? Right. So there is a lot happening right now. It's a great time to be in HR for that reason. I think when we were living in systems that were more structural and functional, and you could put it in org chart and kind of on the boxes and everyone in their swim lanes, could you disrupt without consequence on performance? Yes, but it had to be quick, right? Like if I thought of where the example at this sovereign wealth fund, where there were moments where we were probably too slow in decision making, and yet people knew what was happening, right? And when you're in that phase where it's known, but it's not explicitly communicated, and you're not making your decisions quick enough, there's a stalled time, right? Work gets done, but does it get done, right?
Got it.
Right. It becomes very performative almost because people are in limbo.
And are people more like, what is going on? Like the buy-in is not so much there.
Yeah.
Okay. Love that. Thank you.
And just to add on to what you were saying, it's a great time to be in HR right now. I agree. I think I was saying it to you, but I feel like the talent function in particular, just because I'm more familiar with that one, it's evolved a lot in terms of just expectations, tools, like what we can do. And HR as a whole, I think the last decade has definitely dramatically transformed. But there's always room for growth and everything.
Absolutely.
So where would you say we still need growth within the HR function to really influence business outcomes?
So I have been in this field of HR people, culture, talent, whatever we choose to call it in the future, for a long time. And I think one of the things, just a side anecdote, because it still happens to me and it's surprising when it happens to me, when I am speaking to someone who is looking to pivot into HR or go in HR early career, and they tell me that they want to be in this function because they like people. I'm a people person.
I get that all the time.
It surprises me.
Yeah.
Maybe, 20 years ago, okay, today, but it always makes me think, well, does that mean you don't want to go into marketing because you don't like people? Like, you know what I mean? It's almost counterintuitive to say it that way. I don't think you go into HR because you like people. I think you go into HR because there is an element of, I want to have an impact on the performance of a business. And the resource, right? The way I can do that is architecting the system that will allow people to deliver that performance. Right. So to me, it's much more of an architect role than it is anything else, really.
I like where we're going, by the way. Architect.
I think that there's an element of, for many years, we talked about, I think there's still how HR got caught up in the, right, kind of almost employee relations, where it started from, right?
Yes.
So we're still in that, having to break through that shift. I think there was a phase where we went through understanding the business. And I'd say the shift for today and going forward is it's a fluency about the business, right? You can speak about the business, its metrics as easily as any other business leader, right? As your chief marketing officer, your head of marketing, head of finance, et cetera. So that business fluency needs to be there. There's obvious, I mean, to me, I'm going to say it because I have to, the AI literacy, right? There has to be that element of the technology, data and technology literacy, right? I think where there's not a pull, making sure that you've got the data elements to really deliver on whatever tech you're going to use, knowing that your data is there and your metrics, that you're looking at measuring the right things. System thinking, I think, is a big one, right? And more as we think of agents in the workplace, is that org structure, but what will it look like? And how do I need to prepare people? What do I need to do from a talent development perspective when I've got people who manage agents, right? So they manage their own agents doing their own work. What does that mean for their talent development, right? To be focused on that, I think, is an interesting challenge.
You've opened something up now.
I don't know what it looks like yet, right?
Yeah.
I think we're all learning it, but
yeah,
it will be an interesting, I pulled a quote, I think it was an economist in the UK. If none of us worked and tomorrow morning we wake up and somebody says, okay, we all have to work. Starting tomorrow, we have to work. How would we design the work, knowing what we know and the technology that's available to us, right? And I think there's something about thinking about how work happens that will be key to the HR function going forward. And I'll go back to it is that architect skill set, right? How are you architecting the system, the roles that operate in the system, and therefore the agents that support those roles, those people roles.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the design thinking aspect, though, because when we think about all of the models now, like the chats, the Claudes, they do a lot of, you put in a prompt and they tell you exactly what the solution will be or what to do. But the design thinking aspect of it, it will stay with us. So even when we bring in these tools, it would still allow us to have these kinds of roles where it's still a part of us from a human aspect. So I like that you're calling it an architect and it's design thinking and it's not completely giving it back to
to me,
AI
there's the
tools.
Sense checking. Will this work within our context?
Yeah.
Right? Because as much as the artificial intelligence is intelligent, it will only know your given context.
Correct.
Based on what you've given it, but still there's the nuance of, right? There's the unwritten things of how things get done here that aren't always documented. Hopefully they're explicit, at least explicitly communicated, but it's still nuance, right?
Yeah. I love that you brought that up because you can't design an agent unless you fully understand the context and the situation. And like you said, unspoken things. A friend on my team, actually, she's more in the data insights of talent. She built an agent for her on Claude. She was just laughing, like eating a snack and the agent's doing her work for her. It's her employee called Karen. But she was explaining to me the prompt because I was asking her, like, how did you prompt it so it's doing exactly what you want? Like no iterations were needed. And she told me she sat down for like 30 minutes with like a pen and paper and just thought really hard about what exactly she does to be able to prompt the agent properly. So exactly mimicking what you both said.
Right.
But yeah.
Did I give her that output she was
Oh
looking
yeah,
for?
it's been working. It's Karen and her now working. It's
I'd
the
like
both
a
of
coworker.
them. I know, literally,
Yeah,
it's
that's
her
fun.
coworker she built on Claude. So yeah,
That's super interesting.
Mhm.
And what does she use it for?
She is using it to build a skills-based assessment that we can use internally to help predict what skills will be more needed in the future and which ones will fall off a little bit in terms of need. And then in terms of succession planning, how we can make sure that we're growing and upskilling our force.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's really
Good for
cool.
her.
Mhm.
If we can gear towards org design again, but from a health and engagement perspective, how should leaders be balancing employee engagement with performance expectations?
I think there's something that has existed for too long, in that they're competing interests, right? Can I have a good culture, and can I be a high performer?
Yeah.
My employee experience is a good culture, but my performance one is not. Do they need to be competing in that way, as opposed to really just being two very complementary things? I'll go back to my comment I made earlier. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to do a shitty job today, right? People wake up wanting, for the most part, right? Let's give it 99.9% of the workforce wakes up and they want to do a good job in the workplace. So how do we ensure that what a good job means is made explicit in that performance culture, and that we're rewarding the right things, right? When we choose to ignore the wrong things is often more telling than, right? So we go back to, am I designing the right system? I think the challenge often is, from an HR perspective, we're putting programs against that employee experience. No one wakes up in the morning and says, can't wait to play foosball at the company foosball table today, right?
Yeah.
And I think there have been things that have been put in place that touch on the employee experience piece, and not necessarily how that balances with the performance piece, right? And knowing that that's tied with the right incentives and reward and recognition. So I don't see them as competing at all, right? Lack of a caring culture doesn't mean care and performance, right? They're not competing. We can have both can exist within the system.
I love that you said that. So you can have, well, what would that look like then, if we were just to go through a scenario? Like, what would a healthy high performance culture look like? Does that even exist? Have you been in companies where that's existed?
Great examples of that, where you've got the clarity of what we're working on, the company vision, right? That is explicit. That there's leadership alignment, right? The moment where you've got any of your leadership team that isn't aligned with that vision and is letting it be known, you're in that place where, what I think sometimes we try to do if there's too much of that lack of leadership alignment or lack of any part of my performance system, is we tend to try to compensate it with a feel-good thing. Like, maybe people won't notice, right? If I put this maybe people won't notice, right? So I think there's the clarity of vision, there's the leadership alignment around that vision. We talked about it earlier, the cadence of, right? I know I expect to hear from the most senior leaders in the firm on a regular basis around where we're at, what are changes. Obviously, there's some things that are, confidential and but for the most part, there is that regular rhythm that's built in. And that I know I'm in a place, and I think this is where the element that definitely, I think HR can support all of these, but that element of, I feel there's an element of trust, whether it be through the benefits that are available to me, different programs, leave, right? There's those parts that do enable the performer to say, the individual to say, I'm performing at my best because I'm clear on where I'm going. And there's systems in case risk, I need to manage my own risk.
Right.
Love that.
And there's reward, right? And there's probably 3 prongs to that. There's clarity of vision, the reward, we're rewarding the right things, and you're mitigating my risk, not having to think about things that are going to get in my headspace while I'm trying to perform, right? Because we are human and things do get in our headspace,
Yeah.
whether they be health related, family related, right?
Personal,
That's
Yeah. Clarity, communication, the 2 C's. I think there's a third one.
Cadence.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the theme for
Yay,
today.
we have it.
Just to go back on the change topic,
Mhm.
I know you've dealt with change management quite a few times with different companies. What would you say is the most overlooked elements for successful change management?
How long it takes. How long it takes.
Oh, your 5-year project is one example.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Yes, my 3 years in Abu Dhabi turned into 9.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we can underestimate how long change takes. And all the elements that work in good organizational design around clarity, the communication cadence, all of those apply tenfold in a change period, right? Where you think, my God, do I have to communicate that again? Yes, you do.
Over communicate.
Right?
Yeah.
There really is that element of, and I think there is, we need to recognize, we're reading a lot about it right now. It's inevitable. We are in a big change period. People deal with change at different paces and in different ways, right? For some, it is very much an internalized process, right? So need to let the wheels turn around in my head before I can. Others, it's I'm diving right in, right? And oftentimes we go back to a lot of personality type things in this as well. Like, you need to allow people the time to absorb that change within a limit, right? There has to be a limit to it, but at a pace that feels comfortable to them. So I think looking at the resources that you put in place, whether it be group discussions where people thrive in that learning from others, whether it be more one-on-one settings, because that's where people learn better, right? Are able to both learn and express concerns, frustrations, etc. So I think and all of those elements need to be put in place because there's no one size fits all to change.
This is the first time we're probably like, oh, I'm just like digesting it.
Yeah, I think we're the people that are slowly adapting right now to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. I was just actually picturing what you were saying in workplaces I've been. And I know even myself, sometimes when change happens and you keep getting announcements about it, sometimes I will say to myself, yes, we know this, Jim. Like, yes, we've been told. But then there's somebody beside me that's like, oh yeah, shoot, I forgot we're doing that now. So yeah, everyone's different. I think it's just hard to determine what time frame then to set to speak to all those different people.
Yes, that is. And to me, this is probably one that we haven't touched on yet. When you think of good architecting a system and change management, is the role that managers play in this. So we've talked about the leadership alignment. We've talked about the individual who doesn't wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to do a shitty job today. We have a layer of managers that we put enormous amount of pressure on. Not necessarily equip them with the tools that they need. But to me, they will be the drivers of that.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
There needs to be something that I don't think we can leave it to just a general wait too long for any change. The risk of that to me is those who do get there more quickly, not your high performers, because that's not, those things aren't equal. Someone who gets there more quickly doesn't necessarily mean they're a higher performer. But at one point, you do end up with the folks who are there, however they got there. And your risk is that if there's too many lagging behind, they become your retention risk, right? If I were thinking of it from a pure talent retention, I don't want those people to go. That group got there in different ways at different paces, but they're there, right? If I focus too much attention on the folks who maybe it is a little bit more of a mindset shift. It's less about a learning, right? How they learn or it's much more of these are the ones who maybe wake up with a little bit of a thought and say, I'm going to do a half-assed job today at work, right? So if we wait too long, if we spend too much time on that group, your talent retention risk is there, right? So I think it's always but it's a fine balance.
Yeah.
It is a fine balance. And these are the things I think when we talked a little bit about what this could look like in the future, I can have technology, I can have an agent, I can build that agent to give me my dashboard that tells me who might be at different places in that change journey, right? The judgment call in really kind of understanding what is the point and what are the actions is not the agent that's going to tell me that, right? That's where the human in the loop remains instrumental to this.
Mm-hmm. If we can shift to managers, since you brought it up, thinking about leaders and leadership development, what patterns have you seen amongst managers or leaders that have grown the most?
It's funny because to me it's one of my favorite topics. That middle, unfortunately we call it the middle management layer.
So not execs, not
execs,
directors, those middle managers
managers.
Are directly managing individual contributors.
Yep. And to me, these are the folks that you'd almost call your crucial middle.
I agree.
Right? There is an element of they're the front line to so many things.
Yes.
I'm very optimistic about AI enablement of that group from a learning and development perspective, more than potentially any other group in a company today. I think we've tried management training for years. There's been, I don't know how much money spent on management training globally. It's not something you can learn in a classroom, right?
Or a module.
Exactly.
Which
I'm going to do the performance
happens
management module today, right? I'm going to become an expert in performance management.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge opportunity for things like AI coaching to support those managers. I have been accused of this. I have delivered management training, and I will say to my managers, let's role play that situation.
Oh no,
Who loves a good role play with HR?
HR
right?
loves role play.
Right?
Yep.
But the other challenge with the role play, not only is it with HR, so that's kind of awkward. By virtue of it being a role play, you're trying your best because, right, you're not natural in a role play situation, no matter what we tell you about, just do it naturally. Whereas all of a sudden with AI, there's no judgment, right? I'm going to deliver that. I'm walking into my performance review tomorrow, and here's what I'm going to tell my AI coach, what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Let's get the feedback. Let's hear what so I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. I think there is an opportunity for technology to start serving up data points to managers that would have been difficult or very time consuming today, that people in culture function, people ops still has a lot of difficulty delivering, not through no fault of their own. It's just across multiple systems. So we have an advantage there, huge advantage to enable that. But I think we can't lose sight of this period in particular because we're asking a lot. We started this question with the change management. So who's going to help me know when that crucial point is of are we there? It is that group of people. In any change, it's that group of people who directly manage individual contributors. And we also know that they're the reason that people either stay or go.
I agree.
Yes.
Right? That hasn't changed.
Yeah. I am quick to go if I do not align with my manager's values, ethics, integrity. Like if it's not there, that is when it starts showing up in a workplace, I sense that more versus like the work that we do as a company.
Right.
Because then if it's showing up with that leader, does it show up with other leaders behind conversations and our decisions being made with integrity, I guess.
I need to respect my manager.
Mm.
You need to respect your manager.
Yeah. And so if they're not communicating or they're not showing up, I won't have that respect naturally.
Right.
So
Yeah.
What about for you?
I agree. You don't have to like them.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I'm not looking for my manager to be my friend.
That always helps.
right?
But yeah.
Yeah, you kind of, maybe
Mhm.
have a coffee with them. But you're not looking for a friend. But I think the respect piece is important.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is important. The clarity of communication, the clarity of, right? Just clarity on what the expectations are, communicating regularly.
Yeah.
They seem so basic, but I think it isn't, right? The funny thing about common sense is it's not so common. I think there's also an element of having the tough conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people have a hard time with having hard conversations.
And as humans, we all do. It's just that there is an expectation that person is, carrying that weight more than that manager level is carrying that weight more than others.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes we talked about this in an earlier podcast too, but managers that do really well skills wise, when we were thinking about, promotion, they're going to be a great manager, but maybe they're not going to be a great manager.
Right.
Maybe they need to stay as an expert on this specific area of the product.
Yeah.
And so people think that, let me just tinker with the idea of being a people manager, but it's not the same. Being a people manager and doing IC work is completely different.
It's funny because I do think that this generation in particular, the generation that's about to enter the workforce, it will be interesting to see what that workforce looks like because I'm not so sure that a manager role is what they're going to be aiming for. Right?
That's so funny you say that because I've had a lot of interviews lately with not necessarily just Gen Z, but a lot of them are saying they actually would prefer to be an individual contributor. I'm getting that so often. And I respect it because if you know what you want and you just want to focus in being an expert first, then you do that.
So COVID, I don't think I have an 18-year-old.
Okay.
And working from home during COVID probably didn't help.
Yeah.
Because he saw what his parents as managers were dealing with. And you're probably like, yeah, I'm not ever going to do that.
You think that was one of that?
Yeah.
You think that's part of that?
People have those thoughts.
I have a funny story, but it'll happen off record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
we'll remind you.
Yeah. COVID or not, if you see what it takes to be a manager, all that extra responsibility, and to be blunt, if the pay is not that much higher just because you're a manager, why not just upskill in your field instead?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of elements of the portfolio career as well. Right. Well, we'll start to see more, you're not necessarily in that one job, but you've got more of the fractional or whatever we end up calling it, but different kind of things. I absolutely think this generation is smart enough to know that, well, wait a minute. If I've got a job and I've got to add a manager job to it, do I really want to do that?
Yeah, that's two jobs in one.
But it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah. There's still people that love it.
Yes. That is so interesting. Sorry, my mind is like going.
Just lost it for a second.
Thinking about it because my daughter is 15 and I'm just thinking about her getting into the workplace.
What is
well,
that
she's
gonna
at
look
work McDonald's right now. It's part-time. It's her first job.
Good for her.
But she wants to be a lawyer. So what does that mean? I don't know what that's going to look like for her when she starts working. That's
especially when you think of, the AI tech that we've invested in a company called Spellbook.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Right. There's a disruption to that space that's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's I would say for the most part, I think that's what's exciting too about it is when we think about what the future of work will look like. So this is kind of like where my brain is going. What the future of work will look like. So you're thinking about what are we doing as HR? Are we architecting, designing more? That to me sounds amazing because I'd love to be doing that more than employee relations. I'll be honest with you. So yeah, it's super interesting.
But it's also critically thinking about it in other functions as well.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. If you were to redesign potentially, I'd even start at the high school level, right? Where there should be some kind of career counseling today for that age group coming in to say, okay, as you think about future jobs,
Mhm.
right? Those professions won't go. Marketing will exist. The law will exist. These things will
Mhm.
still exist. But what could careers potentially look like in there? And starting at that age, right? Grade 10,
Mhm.
15 years old, to start thinking about, okay, what might I need to start developing today to think about that
Mhm.
in a future of work that is going to be completely different?
You're right. I honestly, I've talked to my daughter about what kind of support or resources there are to kind of understand, do your friends, have you thought about where you want to be in the future? And because I'm where I'm at, and I kind of like spill out all these things, and she's like, Mom, what is all this that you're saying? I'm not there yet.
Right.
So I think their mindset right now is, oh, we're just going to go to school, learn math, and whoop-a-doo, like that's it.
Yeah.
But so you're right. Like I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a complex, like redesign of what that, career counselor role would look like at high school level.
I so agree. I was actually just having that conversation last week because I was going to ask you too if your daughter views the different career options differently, because I know back then when I was in high school, I thought of the main, I guess, sort of say careers where it's a lawyer, doctor, you're in sales or you're marketing, but there's so many other fields that you are just not aware of unless somebody in your family is doing it that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to learn about those ones. Like, for example, product management. I had no idea what that was in university. I don't know. Maybe some people are like, what? I knew. But I think it's good to educate them in your different options. And then, of course, also where the future of work's going to go to.
And how does that relate to what program you need to take?
Exactly.
Because you don't necessarily need to take that Bachelor of Business degree. So yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, we've got a lot to look forward to, really.
Yeah.
It's scary. Sure, it's scary sometimes, but a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. I'm excited to have a kid and see like what they want to do and guide them. You guys got me excited.
Well, my 15-year-old Sassy, sometimes she listens, sometimes she doesn't. So good luck.
I honestly, I wonder if she'll change. I think you're not going to like this, but I think she's going to change her mind.
She knows her wealth too. So
I can just see
like
her
as a
mind.
lawyer, like going into law.
I think once and this is just totally my assumption, but when she learns about other things, she might find passion in something else.
Yeah, and I'm totally open to that.
You are.
You know, she's creative, and so she's not in that. But I always just tell her, it's like, you don't have to do it because you think I'm gonna like love you more or anything.
Which is like so many kids think.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. She just wants to make me happy. But I said, do what you want. I just know that for me, if I got to start over again, I would want all of that information for me, like at the get-go, without having to learn it afterwards or like having to go into a program and then change my program midway. Like that didn't happen to me, but that happens to a lot of people.
It happens
What
to a
did
lot,
you study
for sure.
Finance.
And then how did you get into talent?
I was looking for a summer job and I found a job as a sourcer at Research in Motion. And I was like, what's a sourcer? What's a recruiter? What's HR?
Thank God you liked it.
Yeah. And thank God I did finance, because that would probably, it's one of those things.
I can see you in finance though. You'd be bored, but you like it. Like, because that structure, she loves that structure and her spreadsheets.
But my ADHD won't let me be in.
You'd be doing ADHD with the formulas. Like you'd be bouncing around.
Thank you. She has so much faith in me.
So, Krista, we have a segment called Under the Table. Basically, it's a little bit more of a fun, spicy, juicy, however we want to call it, question. Feel free to answer it with as much detail as you'd like.
To make it really spicy.
Yes, no pressure.
The spicier the better is what we like.
Now I'm going to need my glasses to read it. Do you want to read it to me?
Of course I can. Okay. What's one thing about culture fit that makes you cringe, but you still hear all the time?
That's actually so fitting.
Yeah.
The ones where it comes more to, we talked about culture as in different cultures globally, like world cultures. And I think there is something that in different global cultures, as opposed to workplace cultures, that show up, and they show up in each of us, whether introversion, extroversion. But when I hear that when it's a hiring manager who I know to be an extrovert,
Mhm.
right? You know what their style is, and they're hiring to their likeness and calling that culture fit.
Yes.
Rather than, someone who might not have been the loud, the rah-rah,
Yeah.
someone maybe more introverted who just gets dismissed a little bit too much for those reasons.
Yeah.
That
Pulling out the bias.
Yep. Yeah.
That bias.
But we
That
call it
bias
cultural
creeping
fit
in.
Yeah.
as opposed to ad. I've had great examples, the flip side of it, where someone where you didn't think was going to be, because of the culture ad, because of the, kind of your left field candidate, and a hiring manager who says, I like this person because of the culture ad.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there are good examples of managers that think about it that way. And I don't think it's an either or. I think we should look at both,
Mhm.
right? Part of your wash up at the end of
Yeah.
a cycle to say, okay, we're down to our two finalist candidates. Let's look at both sides of the coin on fit and ad. In making that, I think it's a great discussion to have.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I
Will
like
be
asking
valued more.
managers, take a look at what your team has right now, look at their strengths, look at some areas of development. What would picture what this next person would look like? So just think
In that,
about that.
Yeah.
And maybe those areas of development would show up in other, resumes that they didn't even think about.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I love that answer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
This was great.
This is great,
Yeah.
Krista.
That was a quick hour.
I know.
First hour
Damn.
ever. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you
you,
both.
Krista.